The florist was exhausted, half asleep, arranging flowers at 2 a.m. when she sent a flirty text meant for her friend. But she sent it to the wrong number, a wealthy client who just ordered from her shop. What she didn't know, he wasn't just a businessman.
He was a mafia boss.
And instead of being angry, he smiled and said, "I like people who aren't afraid of me." Even by accident, now he wants her to deliver flowers to his mansion.
Personally.
Every single day. Emily's fingers were cramping. She'd been wiring roses into bridal bouquets for 6 straight hours, and her small flower shop smelled like a garden had exploded inside it. Wedding season was killing her softly, one stem at a time. It was 2:47 a.m. when she finally collapsed onto the stool behind her counter, her phone glowing in the darkness like a tiny lifeline to sanity. She scrolled through messages from her best friend Sarah, who'd sent her a photo from some fancy downtown bar. "Girl, there's a man here in a suit that costs more than my car. Dangerous eyes. Like he could ruin your life and you'd thank him." Emily snorted, her exhausted brain going fuzzy. She typed back quickly, not even reading what her autocorrect was doing. "That man with the dangerous eyes could ruin me with just one look, smirking face." She hit send, tossed her phone onto the counter, and stumbled toward the back room where she kept a small cot for nights like this. Sleep came fast. The buzzing woke her. Her phone was vibrating so violently it had walked itself to the edge of the counter. Emily groaned, squinting at the bright screen.
3:11 Uhr nachts.
Who the hell was texting her at? Her blood turned to ice. The message wasn't from Sarah. It was from Marco DeLuca. The name sat at the top of her screen like a threat. Marco DeLuca, the man whose assistant had placed a massive order for corporate event arrangements 2 days ago. $5,000 worth of white orchids and blood-red roses. She'd saved his number as a contact because the order was too big to mess up. And she'd just sent him
that.
You should be more careful who you send that to. Emily's hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the phone.
Her throat closed.
Her vision blurred. She read the message again, hoping, praying, she'd misread it. She hadn't. No, 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 no. The words tumbled out of her mouth as she frantically scrolled up to see what she'd sent. And there it was. The flirty message. Sent to Marco DeLuca at 2:47 a.m. Her stomach lurched. She typed back with trembling fingers. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was meant for someone else. I'm so embarrassed. Please ignore that." The reply came in seconds. Too late. I don't ignore things meant for me. Even by accident. Emily felt like the walls were closing in. Her brain scrambled for something, anything, to fix this. But before she could type another desperate apology, a new message appeared. "Go to sleep, Emily. We'll talk tomorrow." The use of her first name made her skin crawl. He knew who she was. Of course he did. She'd written her business name on all the order forms. Bloom and Thorn Florals owner, Emily Harper. She sat frozen in the dark, staring at her phone. Then, against every instinct screaming at her to leave it alone, she opened her browser and typed, Marco DeLuca. The results loaded slowly, like the internet itself was afraid. The first few links were normal. DeLuca Industries. Real estate development. Luxury import, export. Standard rich guy business stuff. But as she scrolled further, her heart began to hammer. A Reddit thread. Is Marco DeLuca connected to organized crime? A news article from 3 years ago. DeLuca family under federal investigation. No charges filed. A blurry forum post with a grainy photo of a man in a dark suit stepping out of a blacked-out car. The caption read, "If you know, you know. Don't cross the DeLucas." Emily's mouth went dry. She clicked on an image. A professional headshot loaded, sharp jaw, dark hair slicked back, and eyes that looked like they could see straight through a lie. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, like a knife with a pearl handle. The same man whose assistant had smiled politely and paid in cash.
Her phone buzzed again.
"Stop Googling me," Emily yelped and dropped the phone. It clattered onto the counter, screen up, his message glowing like a warning. Her heart was trying to escape through her ribs. How did he know? She grabbed the phone with shaking hands. I wasn't. You were. Go to bed, Emily.
She didn't sleep.
She sat in the dark, staring at the door, convinced that any second, men in black suits would kick it down. She rehearsed apologies in her head. She thought about running. She thought about calling the police. But what would she even say? I accidentally sent a flirty text to a maybe mobster, and now he's texting me back. They'd laugh her out of the station. By the time the sun started rising, she'd convinced herself it was fine. He was just messing with her. Rich guys had weird senses of humor. She'd finish his flower order, deliver it professionally, and never think about Marco DeLuca again. At 9 a.m., the bell above her shop door chimed. Emily looked up from the orchids she was trimming, and her breath caught. Marco DeLuca stood in the doorway. He was taller than she'd imagined. The suit he wore was charcoal gray, tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been sewn onto him. His dark hair was neat, his expression unreadable. And his eyes, those eyes, locked onto hers with the kind of focus that made her feel like a butterfly pinned to a board. Good morning, Emily. His voice was smooth, low, and calm.
Too calm.
She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. He stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly on the old wooden floor. The door swung shut behind him, and suddenly the shop felt too small. He moved like he owned the space, like he owned everything. He stopped in front of the counter and placed his phone down. Her message was still on the screen. That man with the dangerous eyes could ruin me with just one look, smirking face. Emily wanted to die. I'm so sorry, Mr. DeLuca. That was a mistake. I was texting my friend, and Do you think I have dangerous eyes? The question caught her off guard. She blinked. What? He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he was deciding whether to solve or destroy. You said I have dangerous eyes. Do you believe that? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. I didn't mean. I think you did. He leaned forward just slightly, his hands resting on the counter. I like people who aren't afraid of me, even by accident. I am afraid of you, she blurted out before she could stop herself. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Smart girl. He straightened, pulling his phone off the counter and sliding it into his pocket. Then he looked around the shop, at the half-finished bouquets, the buckets of roses, the chaos of her little world. I'm adding to my order, he said. I want fresh arrangements delivered to my estate. Every day. For the next week. Emily's heart sank. Every day. Every day his eyes found hers again. And I want you to deliver them. Personally. Mr. DeLuca, It's not a request. The air between them felt heavy. She wanted to argue, to say no, to run. But something in his expression told her that saying no wasn't an option. I'll have my assistant send you the address, he continued, already moving toward the door. He paused with his hand on the handle and glanced back at her. Where something comfortable. The estate is. Large. And then he was gone. Emily stood there, frozen, staring at the door. What the hell had she just gotten herself into? The address arrived at midnight. Emily stared at her phone, reading the message from an unknown number 3 times before it sank in. 1247, Blackwood Estate Drive.
6 Uhr morgens sharp.
Gates will be open. Drive straight through. 6 in the morning? Who wanted flowers delivered at dawn? A man who didn't sleep, apparently. Or a man who wanted to make sure she knew he was in control. She barely slept. When her alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. She showered, pulled her hair into a messy bun, and dressed in jeans and a simple green sweater. Comfortable, like he'd said. Though she suspected comfort wasn't really the point. The arrangements she'd prepared were beautiful, white lilies mixed with deep crimson roses, elegant and almost funeral-like. She'd chosen them carefully, trying to read between the lines of what a man like Marco DeLuca would want. By 5:45 a.m., she was driving through streets she'd never seen before, leaving the city behind. The roads grew quieter, lined with tall iron fences and hedges that hid estates from view. Old money lived out here. The kind of money that didn't need to show off because everyone already knew. At exactly 5:58 a.m., she found the gates. They were massive, black iron, 12 feet tall, with a gold D emblazoned at the center. Security cameras perched on each post like watchful crows. As her van approached, the gates began to open silently, as if they'd been expecting her. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. The driveway was longer than her entire street. Trees lined both sides, their branches forming a tunnel that blocked out the early morning light. Her van's engine sounded too loud in the silence. After what felt like an eternity, the trees opened up, and she saw it. The mansion. It wasn't just big, it was obscene. 3 stories of pale stone and arched windows, with columns that belonged in a museum. Fountains flanked the circular driveway, water cascading over marble statues. Everything about it screamed power and money and don't touch. Emily parked near the front steps, her heart pounding. She grabbed the first arrangement, a heavy crystal vase filled with lilies, and walked toward the entrance. The door opened before she could knock. A woman in her 50s stood there, dressed in a crisp black uniform. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes were sharp. "You're the florist."
Yes.
"Emily Harper." "I have. Follow me." The woman turned and walked inside without waiting. Emily hurried after her, clutching the vase like a shield. Inside, the mansion was even more breathtaking. The floors were white marble veined with gold. A chandelier the size of her van hung from the ceiling, dripping with crystals. Everything was polished, pristine, silent. It felt more like a museum than a home. But there was something else, too.
Fear.
She saw it in the way a young man in a suit stiffened when they passed. In the way a maid hurried down a hallway with her eyes lowered. The staff didn't just work here, they survived here. "Set them in the dining hall," the older woman said, gesturing to a room on the left. "Then bring the rest." Emily nodded and stepped inside. The dining hall had a table that could seat 20 people. More crystal, more gold. She placed the vase carefully in the center, adjusting the stems with shaking hands. When she turned to leave, she heard voices. They were coming from somewhere deeper in the mansion, low, tense, angry. She shouldn't listen. She knew she shouldn't. But her feet moved toward the sound anyway, drawn by morbid curiosity. A hallway stretched to her left, ending at a partially open door. She could see a sliver of the room beyond, dark wood, leather chairs, and 2 men standing close together, arguing. "You're being reckless," one of them hissed. "The feds are watching." "Let them watch," Marco's voice cut through, cold and sharp. "I'm done hiding money for cowards." Emily's breath caught. She should leave.
Right now.
But then she saw it. Past the arguing men, through another open doorway, a basement entrance. Stone steps leading down into darkness. And at the bottom, just barely visible in the dim light, were stacks of wooden crates. But it wasn't the crates that made her freeze. It was the bands wrapped around the stacks inside them. Thick paper bands stamped with eagles and numbers. U.S. Treasury bands. The kind you only saw in movies or in evidence photos.
Cash.
Mountains of it. Her heart stopped. "Are you lost?" Emily spun around so fast she nearly fell. Marco stood 5 feet away, hands in his pockets, watching her with that same unreadable expression. I was just," her voice came out strangled. "Delivering flowers," he finished for her. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "And yet here you are, wandering." "I heard voices. I didn't mean to see."
He was close now.
Too close. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and smoky. "But you did see, didn't you?" She couldn't lie. Not to those eyes. "I didn't see anything," she whispered. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Amusement? Approval? Smart girl, he said softly. Again, he gestured toward the front of the mansion. Finish your delivery. Then go home. Emily didn't need to be told twice. She practically ran back to her van, loaded the remaining arrangements with shaking hands, and set them where the staff directed. She didn't look at anyone, didn't speak. When she finally climbed back into her van and started the engine, her hands were still trembling. She glanced in the rear-view mirror as she drove away. Marco stood on the front steps, watching her leave. That evening, she found an envelope tucked under her van's windshield wiper. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note written in dark ink. You saw nothing, and yet I think you did. Emily's blood turned cold. He knew. Emily didn't cash the check. It sat on her kitchen counter for 2 days, staring at her like a test she didn't know how to pass. $10,000 for one delivery? It wasn't payment, it was a message. Maybe a bribe. Maybe a threat. She told herself she wouldn't go back. But on the third morning, her phone buzzed at 5:30 a.m. Today's arrangement. White orchids. Same time. Don't be late. Her stomach twisted. She could ignore it. She could block the number, pack up her shop, and disappear. But something told her that running from Marco DeLuca wasn't an option. Men like him didn't let loose ends dangle. So, at 5:45 a.m., she was back on that long driveway, her van filled with pristine white orchids arranged in silver vases. This time, Marco himself opened the door. He wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Without the suit jacket, he looked less like a businessman and more like what he probably was, dangerous. You came, he said, as if there'd been any doubt. You didn't give me a choice. A hint of a smile.
No, I didn't.
He stepped aside, letting her in. The mansion was quieter today, less staff, fewer voices. It felt emptier, more intimate. Emily hated that she noticed. The orchids go in my office, Marco said, leading her down a different hallway. I have meetings today. I want something. Calming. She followed him, hyper-aware of every sound. The click of his shoes, the distant hum of voices, her own shallow breathing. They passed rooms she hadn't seen before. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a sitting room with velvet furniture, a gallery wall covered in old photographs of stern-faced men in vintage suits. His office was at the end of the hall. It was exactly what she expected: dark wood, leather chairs, a desk the size of her bed. But the wall behind his desk caught her off guard. It was covered in maps. Not decorative ones, working maps, marked with pins and notes and routes she didn't understand. Set them there, Marco said, nodding toward a side table near the window. Emily placed the vase carefully, adjusting the stems even though they were already perfect. She was stalling. She knew it. But being in this room, alone with him, made her skin prickle with nervous energy. You've been thinking about the other day, Marco said suddenly. She froze. What?
About what you saw.
Or didn't see. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching her with that predator's patience. You've been wondering what happens next. Emily swallowed hard. I told you. I didn't see anything. Liar. The word was soft, almost affectionate, but it hit her like a slap. She turned to face him fully, her hands clenched at her sides. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice shaking. Why do you keep making me come here? Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he pushed off the desk and walked to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. Do you know what people see when they look at me? He asked quietly. She didn't answer. They see money, power, fear. He glanced back at her. But you looked at me like I was just a man who scared you. Not because of what I am, because of what you felt. Her cheeks burned. That text was an accident. I know. His eyes held hers. That's why it mattered. Before she could respond, voices erupted from somewhere below them. Loud, angry, overlapping. Marco's expression hardened instantly. Stay here, he ordered. already moving toward the door. Wait. But he was gone. Emily stood alone in the office, her heart racing. She should leave. Walk out right now. But curiosity, stupid, dangerous curiosity, pulled her toward the door. She peered into the hallway. Empty. The voices were coming from below, echoing up from somewhere deep in the mansion. She recognized Marco's voice, cold and controlled. And another man's voice, younger, more volatile. Her feet moved before her brain could stop them. She found a servant's staircase and descended quietly, following the sound. The stairs led down to a lower level she had known existed, a basement, but not the kind for storage. This one had steel doors and keypads. One door was slightly ajar. Through the gap she saw it. A vault. Not the basement she'd glimpsed before. This was something else entirely. The room was massive, lined with industrial shelving units. And on those shelves, stacked floor to ceiling, were bundles of cash. Shrink-wrapped bricks of $100 bills, each one marked with those treasury bands. There had to be millions, maybe tens of millions. But it wasn't just money. There were ledgers too. Black books lined up on a separate shelf, each one labeled with years and codes she didn't understand. Documents. Records. Evidence. Jesus Christ, she breathed. You really don't listen, do you? Emily spun around, her heart in her throat. Marco stood at the bottom of the stairs, his expression unreadable. Behind him, she could see the shadow of another man, younger, with the same dark eyes. His brother, she realized, the one who'd been arguing. Marco, who the hell is this? The younger man demanded. No one, Marco said, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. She's leaving. She saw the vault. I said she's leaving. Marco's voice was ice. He moved toward Emily, gripped her arm, not rough, but firm, and guided her back toward the stairs. You can't just let her, his brother started.
Luca.
Enough. They climbed in silence. When they reached the main floor, Marco walked her straight to the front door. His hand was still on her arm, warm through her sweater. At the threshold, he finally spoke. Go home, Emily. Forget what you saw. She looked up at him, searching his face for something, anger, threat, anything. But all she saw was exhaustion. And if I can't, she whispered.
His jaw tightened.
Then pray I can protect you from yourself. He released her arm and stepped back. Emily walked to her van on shaking legs. As she drove away, she looked in the mirror one last time. Marco stood in the doorway, watching her disappear. And beside him, barely visible in the shadows, his brother Lucas stared after her with eyes full of calculation. 3 nights passed in suffocating silence.
No texts.
No calls. No flower orders. Emily should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt like she was waiting for a storm she could see building on the horizon but couldn't outrun. She threw herself into work, arrangements for a corporate party, bouquets for a retirement home, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from replaying what she'd seen. The vault. The money. Luca's cold stare. You can't just let her leave. On the 4th night, at 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. A new order notification through her business website. Rush delivery. Midnight. Premium rate, $3,000. Her exhausted brain barely registered the amount. Late-night orders happen sometimes, funeral homes, hospitals, people in crisis who needed flowers when grief struck at odd hours. She clicked on the details. Delivery location, Pier 23, Red Hook Docks. Arrangement, black roses, white lilies. Note, time sensitive. Delivered to warehouse number 7. Her stomach dropped. The docks? At midnight? Every instinct screamed this was wrong. But the order had come through her official system. The payment was already processed. And the handwriting on the special instructions looked familiar, the same elegant script she'd seen on Marco's note. Maybe it was his assistant. Maybe it was legitimate. She tried calling the number listed. It rang once and went to a generic voicemail. Emily sat at her workbench, staring at the order form. She could refund it, cancel, but $3,000 would cover her rent for 2 months. And if it was from Marco's people, refusing might send the wrong message. Against every rational thought, she started preparing the arrangement. By 11:30 p.m., she was driving toward Red Hook with a stunning arrangement of black roses and white lilies in the passenger seat. The city streets were empty, slick with rain. Her headlights cut through the fog rolling in from the harbor. The docks appeared like something from a nightmare. Abandoned warehouses loomed against the night sky, their broken windows like dead eyes. Shipping containers were stacked in rusted towers. The only sound was the groan of metal and the slap of water against concrete. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. She found warehouse number 7. The door was partially open, spilling a sliver of yellow light onto the wet pavement. She parked, grabbed the arrangement, and stepped out. The smell hit her immediately: salt water, rust, and something else. Something chemical that made her eyes water. "Hello." Her voice sounded small and foolish. "Flower delivery?" Footsteps echoed from inside the warehouse. 2 men emerged from the shadows. They weren't Marco's men. She knew that instantly. These men wore mismatched jackets and moved with a twitchy energy that screamed danger. One was tall and gaunt with a scar across his jaw. The other was stocky, with dead eyes and tattooed knuckles. "You're late," the tall one said. I'm right on time. Midnight. I have. Where's the package?" The stocky one moved closer, his hand sliding inside his jacket. Emily's blood turned to ice. The flowers? That's what I. Don't play stupid." Scarjaw grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. The vase slipped from her hands and shattered on the concrete. "DeLuca sent you. Where's the package?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Terror made her voice shrill. "I'm just a florist. Someone ordered flowers." "Liar." He shoved her against her van. "You were at the mansion. You saw the vault." Luca said.
Luca.
The name hit her like electricity. Marco's brother. This wasn't Marco's order. This was a trap. "I don't have anything," she screamed, trying to pull away. "Please, I don't." The stocky man pulled out a gun. Time stopped. Emily saw the barrel, black and infinite. She saw his finger on the trigger. She saw her own death in his empty eyes. "Wait." Scarjaw held up a hand. Luca said, "Bring her alive." He wants to know what she told DeLuca. She's a loose end, Tony. Loose ends get. Emily didn't think. She just moved. She kicked hard, her boot connecting with the stocky man's knee. He howled and stumbled. She ran. Behind her, shouts erupted. Footsteps pounded. She sprinted between shipping containers, her lungs burning, her mind blank with pure survival instinct. A gunshot cracked through the night. She screamed and dove behind a rusted container. Her hands fumbled for her phone. One number. Only one person could help her now. She dialed Marco's number with shaking fingers. It rang once. "Emily? They're trying to kill me." The words tumbled out in a sob. "The docks, Pier 23, they said." "Luca. Stay on the line. Don't hang up." "Where exactly are you?" "Warehouse 7. I'm hiding. I can hear them. I'm 10 minutes away."
"Hide.
Do not hang up."
Marco."
"I'm coming. I promise." She pressed the phone to her chest, trying to breathe quietly. She could hear them searching, their voices carrying across the water. Find her. She couldn't have gone far. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Closer. Closer. Emily squeezed her eyes shut and prayed. Then she heard it. The roar of engines. Multiple vehicles. Tires screeching.
Car doors slamming.
Go, go, go. Marco's voice, sharp with command. Gunfire erupted. Not single shots, a symphony of violence. She covered her ears and made herself small, pressed against the cold metal container. It lasted maybe 2 minutes, maybe a lifetime. Then silence. Emily. Marco's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. Emily, where are you? She stood on trembling legs. Here. I'm here. He appeared around the container, flanked by 3 men in tactical gear. His white shirt was spattered with something dark. His face was a mask of cold fury. But when he saw her, something cracked. Are you hurt? He reached her in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes scanning her for injuries. No, they said Luca. I know, his jaw clenched. I know. Behind him, she could see bodies on the ground. His men were zip-tying one survivor. The stocky man with the gun lay motionless. You weren't ordering flowers, she whispered. No, Marco's voice was rough. You were bait. And I was too slow to stop it. Emily's legs gave out. Marco caught her, pulling her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, rapid and hard. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you now. The mansion was different at 2 a.m. Darker, quieter, like a beast pretending to sleep. Emily sat in the back of Marco's SUV, wrapped in someone's jacket that smelled like gunpowder and expensive cologne. She couldn't stop shaking. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gun. The dead eyes. The certainty of her own death. Marco sat beside her, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. His voice was low and lethal. Whatever he was saying made the driver flinch. When they pulled through the gates, the mansion's lights were blazing. Men in suits stood at every entrance, weapons visible now. No more pretending this was just a businessman's home. Marco ended his call and turned to her. Can you walk? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He helped her out anyway, his hand on her elbow, steady and warm. They walked through the front doors together. The staff had vanished, probably sent away or hiding. Smart. Sir. A man appeared from the shadows, older, gray-haired, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. The room is ready. Should I call a doctor? No doctors, Marco said sharply. Then softer. But have Maria bring tea. Something strong. He guided Emily up a curved staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with paintings of stern-faced men, ancestors, probably, watching her with disapproval.
They stopped at a door at the end.
You'll stay here tonight, Marco said. It's the safest room in the house. Reinforced. Cameras on all approaches. Emily looked at him. I should go home. Your home isn't safe. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something raw behind the control. Luca knows where you live, where you work, everything. The reality of it hit her like a wave. She had no home to go back to. Not anymore. Marco opened the door. The room was beautiful, cream-colored walls, a 4-poster bed with silk sheets, windows overlooking the gardens. A bathroom connected on one side. A sitting area with a couch and fireplace on the other. There's a lock on the inside, Marco said quietly. Use it if it makes you feel safer. But I'll have men outside your door. No one gets in. She walked in slowly, her legs still unsteady. Why did your brother do this? Marco's expression hardened. Luca thinks you're a threat. That you'll talk to the police about what you saw. I wouldn't. I know. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. But Luca doesn't trust easily. And he doesn't forgive accidents. Is he here? In the house?
No.
And he won't be. Marco's voice was cold steel. I made that very clear. She turned to face him fully. He looked exhausted, hair disheveled, blood spatter on his collar, his rolled sleeves revealing forearms corded with tension. But his eyes were alert, calculating, still 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Why are you protecting me? Emily asked. The question came out smaller than she intended. You could have just let them kill you. Marco finished. He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. Is that what you think I am? I don't know what you are. Something flickered across his face, Pain, maybe, or recognition. He looked away, toward the windows where the first hint of dawn was bleeding into the sky. My father built this empire on fear, he said quietly. He believed that power came from making people too terrified to betray you. And it worked. For years, it worked. He turned back to her. But fear only buys loyalty until someone stops being afraid. Or until they're more afraid of something else. Like Luca? Like Luca, Marco's jaw tightened. He wants to continue my father's legacy. The violence. The bribes. The cash hidden in basements like we're common criminals. And you don't. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm trying to go legitimate. Real estate that's actually legal. Investments that don't require offshore accounts. But cleaning up decades of dirt isn't simple. Especially when your own blood is fighting you. A knock at the door made them both turn. The older man entered with a silver tray, tea in a delicate cup, sugar, cream, and something that looked like brandy. Maria says drink the tea first, he said gently, setting it on the side table. The brandy is for after, if you need it.
Thank you, Vincent, Marco said.
Vincent nodded and left, closing the door softly. Emily sank onto the couch, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Marco poured her tea with surprising care, adding sugar without asking, somehow knowing she needed the sweetness. Drink, he said, handing her the cup. She obeyed. The tea was chamomile and something else, lavender, maybe. It warmed her from the inside out. Marco sat across from her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Tomorrow, I'll have my men find out exactly how Luca knew about that fake order. Someone on the inside helped him. And when I find them, he stopped, his hands curling into fists. What will you do? What I have to, his eyes met hers. But you don't need to worry about that. You're under my protection now. No one touches you. For how long? As long as it takes. Emily set down her cup, her hands still trembling slightly. You didn't answer my question. Why are you protecting me? Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned back, his expression softening in a way she'd never seen. You texted the wrong man, he said quietly. But you reminded me I'm not made of stone. He stood, moving toward the door. Get some sleep. We'll talk more when the sun's up. Marco? He paused, hand on the doorknob. Thank you, she whispered. For coming. For saving me. He looked back at her, and something in his eyes made her chest tighten. I'll always come, he said simply. Remember that. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Emily sat alone in the silk-covered luxury of her gilded cage, safe for the first time in days. But safety, she was learning, came with a price. And she had a feeling she was only beginning to understand what that price would be. Emily woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The docks, the gun. Marco's arms catching her when her legs gave out. She sat up slowly. Someone had left fresh clothes on the chair, jeans in her size, a soft sweater, even new underwear still in packaging. The thoughtfulness of it made her uncomfortable. How did they know her size? How much were they watching? She showered and dressed, then opened the bedroom door cautiously. Two men in suits stood outside, professional and alert. Neither looked at her directly. Miss Harper, one said. Mr. DeLuca asked that you join him for breakfast. If you're ready. She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. They led her downstairs to a sun-drenched room she hadn't seen before, a conservatory with glass walls overlooking the gardens. A table was set with coffee, pastries, fruit, and eggs that smelled like heaven. Marco sat at the head of the table, reading something on his tablet. He'd changed into a fresh suit, navy this time, with a crisp white shirt. He looked like he'd slept for 8 hours, though she suspected he'd slept 0. Good morning, he said, setting down the tablet. How do you feel? Like I was almost murdered 12 hours ago. A ghost of a smile. Fair enough.
Sit. Eat.
You'll feel better. She sat across from him, pouring coffee with hands that only shook a little. The first sip was perfect, strong and dark, exactly how she liked it. "How did you know?" she asked. "Know what?" "How I take my coffee. My clothing size. Everything." Marco's expression didn't change. "I make it my business to know things about people in my life." "I'm not in your life. I'm just a florist who sent a stupid text." "You stopped being just a florist the moment you saw that vault." He leaned forward slightly. "And you became something else entirely when my brother tried to kill you for it." Emily set down her cup. "What happens now?" "Now, I find the traitor who helped Luca set you up. And I find the ledger." "The ledger?" Marco hesitated, studying her. Then he seemed to make a decision. "There's a book. A record of every bribe, every payoff, every dirty transaction my father and Luca made for the past 15 years. Judges, politicians, police captains, everyone who's been bought. It's leverage, insurance, and it's hidden somewhere in this house." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Luca is looking for it too. And if he finds it first, he'll use it to bury me and anyone he thinks is a threat." His eyes held hers. "That includes you." Before she could respond, raised voices erupted from somewhere in the house. Loud, angry, unmistakably hostile. Marco was on his feet instantly. "Stay here, Marco." But he was already gone, moving with deadly purpose. Emily sat frozen for exactly 10 seconds. Then, against every ounce of common sense, she followed. She traced the voices to a study near the back of the mansion. The door was cracked open, and through it she could see Marco and Luca facing each other like boxers in a ring. Luca was younger than Marco by a few years, handsome in a crueler way, with the same dark eyes but none of the control. He looked like violence barely contained. "You're protecting a witness," Luca snarled. "She saw the vault. She knows everything." "She knows nothing," Marco cut him off. "And even if she did, killing her would bring more attention than leaving her alive. She's a liability. She's under my protection. Touch her again, and you'll answer to me." Luca laughed, sharp and bitter. "You've gone soft, Marco. Ever since you started this legitimate business fantasy. Father would be disgusted. Father is dead. And I'm not him. No, you're worse. You're a coward pretending to be a king." Luca stepped closer. "The ledger should be mine. I'm the one willing to use it. To protect this family the way it needs protecting. By bribing cops and threatening civilians?" Marco's voice was ice. "That's not protection. That's paranoia. It's survival." Luca slammed his fist on the desk. "And when the feds come, when they finally build a case we can't buy our way out of, you'll wish you'd listen to me. The feds won't come if there's nothing to find. That's why the ledger needs to be destroyed." "You're insane." "I'm done," Marco said quietly. "Done with the old ways. Done with blood money. And done with you undermining me at every turn." Luca's face twisted. "This isn't over."
"Yes."
"It is. Get out of my house." For a moment, Emily thought Luca would attack. His hands curled into fists, his body coiled with rage. But then he smiled, cold and calculated.
"Fine."
"But when everything falls apart, brother, remember, I tried to save you." He turned and stormed past the door, so close that Emily had to press herself against the wall to avoid being seen. His footsteps echoed down the hall, followed by the slam of a door. Emily waited, heart pounding. Then she slipped away, back toward the conservatory. But something caught her eye. Near the entrance to the study, there was a decorative table with a vase, one of her arrangements from days ago. White orchids, slightly wilted now. Someone had moved it from Marco's office. And tucked between the flowers and the vase, almost invisible, was a corner of black leather. Her breath caught. She glanced around. No one was watching. Slowly, carefully, she reached into the arrangement and pulled. A small black book slid free, no bigger than her hand. The leather was worn, the pages thick. She opened it to a random page. Names, dates, amounts, badge numbers, Captain Rodriguez, $50,000 monthly. Judge Patricia Chen, $25,000, case number 4478. Senator Martin Webb, $100,000 real estate approval. Her hands shook. This was it. The ledger. Hidden in her own flowers. Emily? She spun around, clutching the book. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything changed. Put it down. Marco's voice was quiet, but Emily heard the edge beneath it, sharp enough to cut. I wasn't. I just found it. Her words tumbled out in a panic. I know. He stepped into the room, hands raised slightly, like she was a frightened animal. But you need to put it down. Right now. She looked at the ledger in her hands, then back at him. This is what everyone's looking for. What Luca wants. What the police would. Emily, please. Something in his tone made her obey. She set the ledger on the table, stepping back from it like it might explode. Marco moved quickly, snatching it up and flipping through the pages with practiced efficiency. His jaw tightened with each turn. How long has it been there? He asked. I don't know. I just saw it in the flowers. The ones I delivered days ago. He swore under his breath in Italian. Someone hid it there. Moved it from wherever my father kept it. They wanted it found. But not by me. Who would? The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Emily gasped and immediately felt Marco's hand close around her wrist, firm, grounding. Don't move, he whispered. Outside, she could hear shouting. Footsteps running. Then gunfire. Sharp cracks that made her flinch. Backup generator should kick in, Marco murmured. But his voice was tense.
Wrong.
Unless someone disabled it. Marco, what's happening? Luca, the word was a curse. He never left. The emergency lights flickered on, dim red bulbs that turned everything into a horror movie. Marco pulled her toward the wall, his body between her and the door, the ledger shoved inside his jacket. We need to move. There's a safe room in the East Wing. An explosion shook the mansion. Emily screamed. The windows rattled. Somewhere, glass shattered. The smell of smoke began seeping through the vents. He's burning it, Marco said, his voice hollow with disbelief. He's burning the whole house down.
Why?
If he can't have the ledger, no one can. And everyone inside becomes collateral damage. His eyes met hers in the red darkness. We have to go.
Now.
They ran. Through hallways filling with smoke. Past staff members fleeing in terror. Marco's men were engaged in firefights on the lower floors. She could hear the distinctive crack of gunfire echoing through the mansion. East Wing. Marco shouted at one of his men. Get everyone out. But the man didn't respond. He crumpled, blood blooming across his chest. Emily screamed. More gunfire. Marco shoved her behind a marble pillar, drawing his own weapon, a sleek black pistol that looked deadly in his hands. Stay down. She pressed herself against the cold stone, her ears ringing. Through the smoke, she saw figures moving, Luca's men, hunting through the chaos. Marco fired twice.
Clean. Precise.
2 men dropped. This way. He grabbed her hand and they ran again, away from the East Wing now, deeper into the mansion. The smoke was thicker here, burning her lungs. She could feel the heat. The fire was spreading fast. They burst into the industrial kitchen. Marco slammed the door, shoving a metal shelf against it. There's a service exit, he said, coughing. Through the pantry. The door exploded inward. Luca stepped through the smoke like a demon, gun raised, his face twisted with rage and something worse, righteousness. You should have given me the ledger, brother. Marco pushed Emily behind him. This is insane, Luca. You're going to kill everyone. Everyone who's in my way. Luca's eyes flicked to Emily. Including her. She's infected you. Made you weak. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with it. Luca's voice cracked. You'd burn our father's legacy for what? Some woman? Some fantasy of going clean? He laughed bitterly. There is no clean, Marco. There's only power. And you're throwing it away. Marco's hand tightened on his gun. I'm trying to save us. By destroying us first, Luca raised his weapon. Give me the ledger.
No.
Time seemed to stop. Emily saw Luca's finger tighten on the trigger. Saw Marco shift, bringing his own gun up. Saw two brothers who'd loved each other once, now seconds from killing each other. She didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed a cast-iron pan from the counter and hurled it at Luca. It hit him in the shoulder. He stumbled, his shot going wild, shattering a window. Marco lunged forward, tackling his brother to the ground. They fought like animals, brutal, desperate, all technique abandoned for raw survival. Emily, run! Marco shouted as he grappled with Luca. But she wouldn't. Then she saw it, across the kitchen, through an open door, the basement entrance. And beyond it, the furnace room. She could see the orange glow of industrial flames. The ledger. She could destroy it. End this. Emily ran, pulling the ledger from where it had fallen when Marco tackled Luca. Behind her, she heard Marco scream her name, but she didn't stop. The furnace room was hellishly hot. The flames roared like a living thing, fed by the chaos above. She stood at the edge, the ledger clutched in her hands. All these names, all this corruption, all this blood. She threw it into the fire. The pages caught instantly, curling and blackening. Decades of secrets turning to ash in seconds. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind. Marco, bleeding from a cut above his eye, pulled her back from the flames. It's done, she gasped. No one can use it now. He stared at the burning ledger, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at her, and something cracked in his face. Relief, grief, maybe even hope. No one can destroy us with it either, he said quietly. Behind them, sirens wailed. Fire trucks.
Police.
The real world crashing back in. Luca appeared in the doorway, smoke-stained and defeated. He looked at the flames, at the ledger burning to nothing, and his face went blank. You destroyed it, he whispered. You actually destroyed it. It's over, Luca, Marco said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Let it be over. For a moment, Luca looked like he might fight. Then something in him broke. He sank against the wall, his gun clattering to the floor. Father would have killed us both for this, he said. I know, Marco's hand found Emily's, squeezing tight. But Father's dead. And we're still alive. Outside, the mansion burned. But they walked out together, all three of them, into the cold morning air and the flashing lights of salvation. 3 weeks later, Emily's flower shop smelled like normal again. Like soil and stems and possibility. Like life returning after a storm. The insurance money had come through faster than expected, Marco's doing, she suspected, though he'd never admit it. She'd replaced the broken window, repainted the walls, restocked her coolers with fresh blooms. To anyone walking by, bloom and thorn florals looked exactly as it had before. But Emily wasn't the same. She moved through her morning routine, trimming roses, updating the website, arranging a birthday bouquet, but part of her was always listening, waiting, looking over her shoulder. The DeLuca mansion had burned for 6 hours before the fire department contained it. The east wing was completely destroyed. The west wing salvageable, barely. The vault and the basement, where all that cash had been stored, collapsed into rubble. The official story was an electrical fire. Faulty wiring in a century-old building. No one mentioned the gunfight. The bodies removed quietly in the night. The brothers who'd nearly killed each other over the ghost of their father's empire. Marco had disappeared. The news said he'd left the country, restructuring his businesses overseas, the articles claimed. Stepping back from public life. There were photos of him at an airport, designer sunglasses hiding those dangerous eyes, looking every bit the wealthy businessman seeking privacy. Luca had vanished too. Rumors swirled, witness protection, prison, maybe just running from debts he could no longer pay. No one knew for sure. And Emily? She was just the florist who'd had a brief contract with DeLuca Industries. When reporters showed up asking questions, she smiled politely and said she only knew them as clients. Nothing more. The lie came easily now. She tried not to think about Marco, about the way he'd caught her when she fell, the warmth of his hand in hers as they walked out of the burning mansion, the last thing he'd said to her as the ambulance took her away to check for smoke inhalation. "I'll make sure you're safe. I promise." She hadn't heard from him since. It was better this way, she told herself. Clean break. Back to real life. Back to being ordinary Emily Harper, who arranged flowers and paid her rent on time and definitely didn't get mixed up with Mafia bosses. Except every time the shop door chimed, her heart jumped. Every time her phone buzzed, she checked to see if it was him. It never was. Until one Wednesday morning, for weeks after the fire, when she arrived at her shop to find something impossible. A black SUV parked outside. The same one that had picked her up that night at the docks. The same one she'd ridden in, wrapped in someone's jacket, smelling smoke and fear. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. The SUV didn't move. The windows were tinted black. She couldn't see inside. She went about her morning, trying to ignore it, but it sat there like a question she was afraid to answer. At 10 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at the screen, her heart in her throat, before finally opening the message. "You texted the wrong man once. Ready to see what happens if you text him again?" Emily's breath caught. She looked up. The SUV's back door opened. Marco stepped out. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, casual in a way she'd never seen him. His hair was slightly longer, less controlled. He looked tired, but when his eyes found hers through the shop window, something in her chest cracked wide open. He crossed the street slowly, deliberately, giving her time to lock the door, to run, to pretend she hadn't been hoping for this every single day. She opened the door instead. "Hi," he said quietly. Hi, her voice was steadier than she felt. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked into her small shop, looking around like he was seeing it for the first time, really seeing it. The organized chaos, the flowers in every color, the life she'd built with her own hands. "It looks good," he said. "Better than before." Insurance help. A ghost of a smile. "I'm sure it did." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything unsaid. "You disappeared," Emily said finally. "I had to. The feds were circling. Luca agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. He's testifying against some of Father's old partners. I needed to let the smoke clear. Literally and figuratively. And now I'm out. Really out. DeLuca Industries is being liquidated. The property's sold. The accounts frozen and audited." He met her eyes. "I'm just Marco. No empire.
No legacy.
No dangerous business. Just Marco," she repeated softly. "Just Marco." He stepped closer. Who can't stop thinking about a florist who accidentally sent him a text about dangerous eyes. Despite everything, the fear, the fire, the impossibility of it all, Emily felt herself smile. That was a really embarrassing text. It was perfect. His hand reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle it made her ache. "You saw me. Not the name. Not the reputation.
Just
me. I also saw your vault full of illegal money." He laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You did. And you could have run. Should have run. But you threw a pan at my brother instead." It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. It was. His expression grew serious. "Emily, I'm not going to pretend I'm a good man. I've done things, made choices that I can't take back. But I'm trying to be better. And I'd like to try with you. If you'll let me." She should say no. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to close this door and never look back. But Emily had learned something in those burning halls, in those terrifying moments. Safe wasn't the same as alive. I'm not sure I know how to date someone who used to be in the Mafia, she said. I'm not sure I know how to date someone who hasn't, his lips quirked. We'll figure out together. Emily pulled out her phone, opened a new message, and typed carefully. Those dangerous eyes? Still working. Coffee? She showed him the screen. Marco's smile was slow, warm, and devastating. He pulled out his own phone, typed something, and her phone buzzed a second later. Thought you'd never ask. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the florist and the reformed criminal standing in a tiny shop full of flowers, starting something that should have been impossible. Emily locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here, she said. They make terrible coffee but amazing pastries. Sounds perfect. As they walked out together, no bodyguards, no SUVs, just 2 people taking a chance. Emily thought about that night 4 weeks ago. The accidental text that had changed everything. She'd sent it to the wrong man. But maybe, just maybe, he turned out to be exactly the right one. Marco's hand found hers as they walked down the sidewalk. And for the first time in weeks, Emily felt like she could finally breathe.